So good afternoon, everyone. It's Mitch here, and today I'm with Tyler Preston. Tyler Preston owns Rockfish Divers here in Victoria, and he's also a PADI course director. Welcome.
Hi, Mitch. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing this. It's great. So I was wanting to ask you a bunch of questions today because a lot of people are wondering sort of how do they get into diving? How does the cold water diving differ from the warm water diving? And how did you get into diving?
I originally did some traveling through Australia. That was close to 20 years ago. And I just did what they call a Discover Scuba Diving. It's just sort of one session in then it was back in the ocean on the Great Barrier Reef. And I was hooked right from that moment. At the time, I was kind of at a place in my life where I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And here's this instructor. He taught us to sail and he taught us to dive. And he had just come from Indonesia for a couple of years. And this was his job. He was making money doing what I was paying good money to do. And so I was just at that right time in my life where I decided, wow, I can spend the rest of my life working 50, 60 hours a week, slugging away at something that I don't want to do, or I could do something that I love and I'm really passionate about.
Well, that's pretty cool. And I understand you came back to Canada, wasn't too long, and you went straight into it. You did your dive master course, your instructor course, and you just got right into it and started teaching diving pretty quickly.
I did, yeah. I took a bunch of the beginner level courses. I was actually living in Calgary at the time, and decided that this is something that I wanted to do, and so I moved out to Vancouver, and the rest is sort of history. I fell in love with the cold water diving. Obviously, there was a whole bunch more to see here in the on the West Coast than there was in Calgary.
What was that diving like out in Calgary compared to here? Was it colder? Was it?
I was diving in Lake Chaparral. Anybody out there who knows Calgary, Lake Chaparral is just sort of, it would almost be akin to like an elk lake. It's sort of a man-made thing, but essentially there was a concrete cylinder that was maybe 3 or 4 feet in diameter and about 4 feet long, and that was the highlight of what we saw underwater. But nonetheless, I still absolutely loved it, and there is still good diving to be had in the Calgary area. You go to Banff, there's some cool lake diving there. But of course, it doesn't have the critters that we see around here on the West Coast.
Yeah, and I came from a kind of similar background. I learned how to dive in Lake Okanagan, and the life there, I think I saw 2 or 3 fish in about 25 dives there. It's pretty silty, there's not great visibility, but just being underwater was, a novelty in itself, and that's kind of what drove me to move here in the first place, to come to UVic.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I remember for my advanced night dive, we saw 1 trout, and we chased this whole trout around for an entire dive because that's all there was to see. Of course, the diving here is very different, and so we see all sorts of giant Pacific octopus and wolf eels, seals, sea lions, plus all the macro life that is really unbelievable that the cold water brings.
Very cool. And I know you have a pretty cool story about an octopus up in Port Hardy that was on the big side, to say the least.
Yeah, I would say that's probably one of my most memorable diving events. We were up in Port Hardy, and I was minding my own business, and this giant Pacific octopus pretty much sought me out. He came to me, and I turned, and there he was, and he's got one of his arms outstretched towards my face. And he sort of came towards me, and I was totally in awe. This monster was probably 15 to 18 feet long, arm to arm. It was unbelievable. And so, anyways, in the end, this octopus sort of jumped, for lack of a better word, up, and he did a full sort of like a starfish formation. I could see his beak in the middle below his mantle, and he was absolutely monstrous. It was very clear to me then that he was very aware of me, and he wanted to send a message to me. And it was unlike any other sort of wild encounter that I've ever had. There's nothing really terrestrial like that sort of could compare to it.
That's cool. I'm jealous. The giant Pacific octopus is definitely my favorite creature out there, and every time I see one, I just stop everything. If I have my camera, I'm going to get in there and take a bunch of photos, and it just becomes all about that dive. And same with stubby squid and opalescent squid, any sort of cephalopod. I just think they're the coolest thing, and definitely something really cool to check out underwater.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen lots of different types of cephalopods, and they are very, very cool to watch their chromatophores turn color and such underwater. It's a pretty wild experience. When I was in Palau, we saw several cuttlefish, and they're probably the only creature that I would say are almost more likable than the giant Pacific octopus. They don't hide really from us at all, and so cuttlefish pretty cool as well.
And for those people that don't know, Palau is basically the number one place in the entire world to go diving. Would you say that?
Yeah, it's very close. The Galapagos has been ranked as some of the best diving in the world, but Palau as well. Of course, both of them are better known for large pelagic life, large schools of hammerheads, whale sharks, turtles, all sorts of different reef sharks and things like that. We don't see quite the big pelagic life around here, but because of the cold water and the nutrients that all the currents bring through around the west coast, the macro life here is unbelievable. The diversity of life is truly unbelievable. The colors, the reds and the oranges and the yellows and the whites and the browns and all of these things. You go on wall dives and you can't put a finger anywhere without potentially damaging something. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah. And you just got back from Quadra Island. I was talking to Curtis, who you went with, and he took a bunch of photos, posted them online, and the colors up there are just absolutely intense. There's cup corals and all sorts of cold water corals and little anemones that are just crazy, crazy colors that you just don't get to see farther south on the island.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were very near Seymour Narrows, which is the fastest currents in North America, actually. And so, of course, anytime we're seeing a lot of current, we see a huge diversity of life, lots of nutrients and such coming through. So, the diversity of nudibranchs was unbelievable. All the different crabs, anemones, big ones, small ones, obviously the diversity of life. But it's interesting. You also see what's happening down there from an ecological standpoint as well. Anybody out there that's familiar with keystone species, of course, the sea otter is a keystone species who eats the sea urchins, and they manage, for lack of a better word, the sea urchin population. Well, without the sea urchins, without the sea otters, the sea urchins have pretty much taken over there. We did dives where literally the entire bottom of the seafloor was covered in sea urchins and almost no kelp to be seen. Of course, the sea urchins eat kelp, and so unfortunately these things are decimating these kelp forests. And that's what BC is very well known for. You go to Ogden Point and it's pretty amazing to dive through those kelp forests with all the rockfish and spiny lumpsuckers and things like that find homes in these kelp forests. And up there was very little to be had, and it is because these sea urchins have just taken over.
Absolutely, and don't sea urchins, they kind of prey on other things like anemones and nudibranchs, things like that?
They do, yeah. It's they prey on all sorts of different things, and it's really interesting though to see how things have changed. Of course, we had a sea star epidemic that came through a few years ago, and we've seen some really interesting changes in sort of the ecosystem in general, even locally in our own backyard in the Saanich Inlet. I'm noticing different critters popping up, and it's really interesting to see it happen firsthand.
Yeah, and you have a BSc from UVic. You did psychology, focusing on what exactly was the background?
It was my degree was in psychology, Bachelor of Science, but I focused on environmental psychology. Dr. Robert Gifford in the psychology department has literally written the book on environmental psychology. And I had worked in the dive industry for many years before going back to university. And while I was going through my diving career, I was teaching divers, and I felt like I was seeing a change in the students that I was teaching. All of a sudden, you take them through the open water, advanced rescue, etc., and they started. It seemed as though they were starting to care about the environment, right? How can you not when you go underwater and you see an entire population of sea stars get absolutely wiped out, or see sea urchins decimating, kelp forests, and how can you not sort of, sit up and say, what is going on here? And so, anyways, I was really curious about sort of what was actually happening. And sort of my own anecdotal evidence is that I believe that this is place attachment, right? I think that it's just like wherever you grow up, right? When you grow up in this area, you feel attached to it, and so as a result, you're more likely to protect it. And that has been proven in the research. It hasn't been proven underwater that I'm aware of. I was planning on doing a master's at one point to see if that was the case, but I believe that is the case. When you take people to see this whole new system underwater, you start sort of sitting up and saying, hey, what's happening here? And you start caring about it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And when I came to UVic, came as a business student, and I came into the UVic Scuba Club, and there's all these biologists, and I started to learn about the stuff that's underwater and how all these organisms are interacting. And it's true, absolutely. When you get exposed to that through diving, you start to think about what's going on. You start to really care about ocean-related issues, stuff like that.